think AI is that next step where it might not be something where everyone's comfortable with it or they understand it. But what about your grandparents? What about your peers and your colleagues? What about your kids? How does everyone fit in that equation and not leaving anyone behind with it and saying, well, we're just going to teach all the people in Silicon Valley how this works or all the people who know how to code and leave everyone else in the dust? It's how do you bring it to the masses?
Welcome to Embracing Digital Transformation, where we investigate effective change leveraging people, process, and technology. This is Darren Pulsford, Chief Solution Architect, author, and most importantly, your host. On today's episode, bringing GenAI to the masses with special guest, Zach Hadley. Zach, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Hey, Zach, we spent some time with it's Mayor Johnson over in Somerset, Ohio. I was blown away with what he's doing with a bunch of interns or former interns, and it's just amazing. But before we drop into what Mayor Johnson's doing and why you're on the show, let's hear Zach Hadley, the superhero Zach Hadley. We got to hear his background story because every superhero has a background story. So what's yours, Zach?
Yeah, I appreciate the intro. That's some kind praise. Honestly, I have been in Ohio my whole life. I grew up in Ohio and I went to Ohio University, which is actually how I ended up getting paired to work with Mayor Johnson in the first place. I studied city planning and then I got a master's in it at Ohio State after. And I got on with the mayor and was working in the Appalachian region, just doing some regional development, a little bit of city planning, a little bit of government work. And I just really like that kind of stuff. And he and I have stayed in touch over the years. And he told me, I have this interesting stuff going on at the village where we're going to be doing some work with AI, and I'd love to have you aboard. And he knows that I've done some stuff with making videos with social media. And he said, I think you'd be a really good fit to help out with this. So I've kind of married a bit of some hobbies that I've done in the past, some interests that are new and emerging, like with AI, and some things that I've done with my schooling and some of my work stuff. But I've worked everything from nonprofit affordable housing to small government with something like the village to a city like Athens, Ohio, where I went to undergrad, to a startup doing workforce mobility and tech, trying to get pretty much workers to and from work. Think of it almost like a shuttle for adults to get to and from work, and doing some stuff with, I believe I said the affordable housing arena with nonprofits. And my first stint was with McDonald's doing corporate real estate development and GIS. So a lot of different things and bringing it all together to try to see how AI can fit in and how I can fit into AI and help to bring it to the common people, as you know, that Mayor Johnson's working on.
It's amazing to me because most of the people I have on my show are AI technologists.
Right.
They are, I can show you all the algorithms on how to do AI, or they're AI policymakers or things like this. I've had a handful of people that are just normal people with normal careers that are starting to leverage AI to do great things. You taken it even further, which is something I really appreciated. And that is, you want to teach other people how to take advantage of Gen AI to do everyday tasks that they do, which I think is beautiful and wonderful. And that kind of fits in your passion, right? Your passion of wanting to help others.
Yeah, and that's a big reason why I find a lot of interest and not just that, but fulfillment by doing something like this. Because if you think about something like some of the people I've seen come on your podcast in the past, talking about email and the advent of email and the internet and different things like that, a lot of people said, this is just a fad. I don't want to learn this. This is something I don't understand. I don't want to deal with all that. That's someone else's problem, not mine. That's younger people. But it's not. And now everyone has email, basically. Everyone's using the internet, basically. And that's only expanding and becoming more and more commonplace, where now it's strange if you're not. So if you think of something like AI, some people might be averse to it, where they might not understand it, or they might be scared of it, or they might kind of a mix of the two, or might have other reservations. But the important thing with any new technology isn't sitting there and going, I don't want to touch it because I'm scared of it or I don't understand it. It's how do I get comfortable and familiar with it, and how can I use it in a way that is helpful to me and is something that I can get some comfort in and something that I can just do better with my life and hopefully contribute to the world with it. And I think AI is that next step where it might not be something where everyone's comfortable with it or they understand it, but what about your grandparents? What about your peers and your colleagues? What about your kids? How does everyone fit in that equation and not leaving anyone behind with it and saying, well, we're just going to teach all the people in Silicon Valley how this works or all the people who know how to code and leave everyone else in the dust? It's how do you bring it to the masses and how do you make it to where anyone can use it? Because a tool is only as good as the ability to be used by as many people as it can be in an effective manner. If you have a tool and it's
So
siloed, you can't use it.
yeah, I love how you're reaching beyond generations,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I look at my parents; they're not even boomers. They're in the great generation
Mm-hmm.
or the greatest generation, right? Actually, they're in the lost generation, the one in between the greatest and the boomers. Um, and it's fascinating to me. They all use email now. They still need some help.
Sure.
They can now do Zoom calls,
Mm-hmm.
but they still need some help. But Gen AI, you're as a Gen Z, because you're Gen Z,
Yeah,
you're
I'm right on the cusp.
27,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, right on the cusp. You're reaching beyond the millennials, beyond the X Gen.
Mm-hmm.
You're reaching the boomers and you're going after them and saying, let me show you this great technology and how it can improve your life. You know what, Zach? Hat off to you, man. I mean, that's incredible what you've done with Mayor Johnson in Somerset Village. Um, let's talk a little bit about your approach to this because
Sure.
I'm. It would be hard for a technologist to get in your shoes and understand. I'm going to say common people, but just normal people, right? Because in technology, we live in this bubble that, well, surely everyone understands what we understand, right?
Right.
But we've been living in this bubble so long that no one can really relate to it. So tell me how you approach that because it's different, right?
Yeah, and that's a really good point that you make. As I think about things like that and people doing things in areas that they're not necessarily trained in or that's not necessarily their expertise, I've found that that's sometimes when the breakthroughs and the best ideas come. Because as someone who studied, we'll use city planning as a quick example, people will be like, that sounds hard or that sounds complicated. I'm like, have you lived anywhere? They say, sure. I'm like, you're halfway there. Like, you understand there's a
I
lot of
love it.
traffic right here. This should probably be fixed. This light is too short. Okay, well, that's transportation planning. Sure, there's numbers to it and algorithms that you can use, and you can comb the data and you can use GIS and stuff. But at the end of the day, what's the problem? What's a possible solution? And then using data and different things to drive those solutions. And if you're just a planner, you might think, well, I know how to do that better than anyone. But what about the person who drives it every day? You might just be seeing, hey, there's traffic this place, but you've never driven it. So who's the real expert? Is the real expert the person who's using it who might not have a background in planning? Or is the real expert the person who has a background in planning but, hasn't driven it? And it's the same thing with something like Gen AI. You could code it, you could do all the stuff to make it, but if you don't use it or really know how to effectively leverage it or use it, that's going to be a problem. And you need to make sure that you're going to be someone who can make a tool that people can use and learn from the people using it. It's that UI where you want to make sure that the user is actually using it in a way that you understand. And if you design it thinking they'd use it a certain way and you see that they happen to use it a different way, you should meet them where they're at with how they're using it instead of saying, well, I'm designing it to be used this way. How a tool is used is the important part, not necessarily how you want the tool to be used, because practice versus principle are different things. Practice is what
Yeah, yeah,
happens in
yeah.
the real world, and you need to make sure that if it's going to just happen in principle, it won't exist in the real world. But what are people actually using it for? What is the practice? And if you can look at that and say, okay, well, I want to make sure that seniors can use this, what would a senior use it for and what would they have an interest in? Talking to seniors, saying, what would you use this for after I tell you a little bit about how it works, what would you use this for in trying to do things that would enrich your life? What's something you'd want to learn or do that AI might be able to help you with? And you might think something totally different from what they say, and they might go one direction. You might think it might be learning tech
But
and
so
stuff.
you have to be you have to be open enough to hear them
Yes,
instead of
yes,
injecting, right? All
yes.
right, so let's talk a little bit about this. Let's talk specific about the use cases that you found because you guys
Sure.
targeted Somerset Village is it's a small it's like 1,500 people
Yeah,
in
if
the
that.
village itself, right?
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of elderly people there, a lot of young families, or not so many young families. It's an aging village.
I would say it's pretty typical of Appalachia without having the demographics in front of
Okay.
me. A lot of what I've noticed in my time in the village is going to be people that have grown up there, stayed there, lived there. It's not going to be something where you're going to see a lot of really young people moving around and stuff unless they're born there or they live there. It's not somewhere a lot of people are moving. Part of that's jobs, but that's just kind of the nature of a lot of those kinds of places where it's very much the family's been here, the family is here, and you might have a
The
couple
family's here.
generations.
We're staying here.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So you, Mayor Johnson asked you to come up with, you've told me about Mayor Johnson. He gives nebulous things, and then
yeah,
you go out
yeah.
and try and figure out how to do it.
Sure.
Um, so, what was your approach? You went and talked to elderly people. What was your approach? Because you generated these videos to help people understand generative AI and how to use it in their
Yeah,
everyday lives. So, you went and talked to people.
yeah.
How did
So
you approach that?
part of it was we did and we didn't talk to the seniors directly, and I want to kind of explain that. So Job and
Okay.
Family Services and different organizations that work directly with elderly people we've been talking to saying we can do this in a way that can help to bring AI to the demographic that you serve. And part of that was seeing what are some things that you notice that they ask a lot or that they have questions about a lot. So going directly to not necessarily the people asking the question, but the people fielding the questions and
Uh,
saying,
People fielding
yeah,
the
what do you have a
questions.
lot of questions on? And what is something that you wish if I just had a video that I could show someone on how to do this, or I had a resource that they could utilize and I could teach them how to use it that could direct them to it, or if it's not necessarily a landing page or a website, some sort of a solution. And that is largely how we started that. And then we also took it a step further and said, let's ask AI. What are some things that a senior would benefit from AI? Ask the AI itself. And it gave us all kinds of ideas. And we said, generate a script for us. What kind of a script would you have for a video on that? Give us a script for all 5 of those suggestions you gave us. And it did. So not only do you ask the different organizations, but you also ask the AI and you also kind of ask yourself and you blend all those together where nothing is in a vacuum or siloed. You're taking a summation of the information available to you and you are marrying it together to get the best possible outcome. Because,
So,
yeah,
I I love what you did there because what you what you did was you're using Gen AI to help figure out how to teach people how to use Gen AI. So you got use cases from them, from the people that are fielding questions from seniors, from your own experience. Pretty brilliant. And so you already are learning yourself how to use Gen AI effectively
yes,
by doing this.
yeah. And it's a learning experience not only for me, but also for the people using it. So, as someone without a background in AI, I found that again, kind of with the planning example, sometimes you don't know the things not to ask. And sometimes you would think, well, that's probably not feasible. I wouldn't ask that. And someone who doesn't know what shortcomings may or may not exist might ask it and say, well, why don't you just do this? And you might sit there and go, yeah, why don't we do that? I've not actually done that, or I don't know if I can do
Let's
that, or I think
ask
so.
and find out, right?
Yeah. And then from there, it's just that doing it. And that's something that Mayor Johnson's good at is, like I said before when we were discussing, he's very good at, he sees something happening, and instead of going, well, let's take 6 months and let's plan meticulously and let's dot our I's and cross our T's and make sure everything's perfect, and then let's do it. He says, this is interesting. Tomorrow or today, I'm going to start doing this thing. And then he just starts doing it. And the idea
And then
is,
seeing what impact it has and
yes,
seeing benefits or yeah.
yeah, you learn by doing. You don't learn by just, well, here's how I think it'll go. You just dive right in. And then when you do that, it'll quickly show you if it's how you think it is or not. And you can tease out details from there and you can iterate.
Okay, let's shift a little bit. Let's shift into the use cases that you found. Because you found some use cases, right? Because you did videos on these.
Yeah,
So, what were some of the use cases that you found that are beneficial to everyday life that people are experiencing, especially seniors, right? That's who you focused on first.
yeah. So some of the things that were use cases, we ironically kind of took some ideas from stuff that I would discuss on social media because the mayor did follow me on social media when I was on there and he knew some of the stuff I posted about. And we kind of played to some of that because I would already teach people online how to do those things. So I kind of had an idea
Okay.
of some of the ways that stuff would work. So some of it was budgeting, how to cook for the month, which those kind of go hand in hand because you save on buying in bulk and you can definitely marry that up with some savings for your budget and you save time, which lets you have more time to work or do other things. So it all kind of played together. But one thing was how to cook for the month. And people had asked me, when I was doing the social media stuff, can you build a cookbook for us? Can you teach us how to do this? And I did it all from scratch by hand. It probably took me hundreds of hours to make one for every month of the year, 10 different dishes with each one. And it was a lot of time. With AI, we did that. And we probably could do everything I did meticulously and painstakingly by myself, probably in like 5 hours or less. So if you think of that time saving, that's astronomical, not just for the creation of something like that and that resource where it might be just as good, if not better, of what AI can create, but the reach of that and the implementation of that being just as valuable and being able to get that to people and being something where you could teach people, hey, you might be someone who is living by yourself, or you might be someone who is trying to cook for a family and you don't want to go out and get something from the library of cookbooks, or you don't want to go buy a cookbook, or maybe you want to try some new recipes or something easy. Just pop it into AI and you can just have it bring you recipe ideas. And you can say, well, I want to eat and I want it to be gluten free and I'm trying to save money and let's do no more than $10 for the entire family to eat each meal. And you can say scour the web and look for any sort of coupons available from Kroger and do that. And let's see if there's any sort of weekly specials I can take advantage of. Boom, it does that. You then do that. And we showed
Wow.
that real time. We're saying this is what you can do. Because we didn't go and check beforehand. We were doing it just off the cuff and just seeing what came off. And it came out really well. And it said, hey, here's what I found. And depending on the AI that you're using, it would cite its sources and say, hey, click this link, check this out. You can see where I got it from.
Well, all right. So you mentioned which AI you were
Yeah.
using. That's something that a lot of people don't understand. There's lots of options out there,
Yep. And it keeps expanding.
right?
Yeah.
And it keeps expanding. So where if I'm a senior and I don't want to spend all this time researching all the different AIs that are out there, where do I start? Where do I
I
go?
think a good thing is ChatGPT would be the most known one from a senior, but you could even type
Okay.
in just AI in Google and see what comes up and just see what are the different ones. There's going to be tools. You're going to have Gemini, which is Google's. You're going to have Copilot, which is Microsoft's. You're going to have Anthropic. They have Claude. There's all kinds of different ones that you can look at. There's really no wrong answer. You can use any of them to do similar tasks, but each ones are more robust in different ways, obviously.
Okay. So how as a someone that's how reliable can I trust? Because I've heard horror stories. I've heard if you ask ChatGPT to make a dinner with arsenic, it will.
Right. And part of,
Right. So how much can I trust? How much can I trust that the Gen AI is spitting back is going to be valuable or not hurt me or things like that? And is that a concern?
yeah, and that's one of those questions that I think has people turned off on the idea of it, where it's kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, where people say, I don't fully understand or trust it, so I don't want to touch it and I'm scared of it. The way that something can be safer, better, and work how it should and do good is by people who are aiming to do good with something using it. Because large language models will learn from the inputs of their users. And what you want to have is you want to have this input of positive things instead of negative things. And the more positive things it gets, the more likely it is to return positive outputs. And if you want to ask it something, you can always go to Google and you can always check and be like, hey, is this okay? Is this something that I should be concerned about or whatever if you're not sure about something? Or coming into it with a little bit of an idea on a background topic and being that as your introduction into it. So let's say you understand cooking and you want to ask it some stuff about cooking. That would be a good place to start. You don't want to go, well, I know nothing about investment banking. Let's ask it something. You have no idea if that's true. You don't know. And you got to
Right.
worry
I
about
so
them.
I
Yeah.
I love what you said there. You have to use it as not a I'm going to do everything that it says. You have to use your brain, right? The
Right.
thing in between your ears
Right.
or the thing on your shoulders to say that sounds right or that doesn't sound right. We still need to have that critical thinking that's out there.
Yes.
Right? That's still important. Okay. All right. So budgeting, cooking. I love the cookbook idea,
Yeah.
which and you said something interesting. It still took 5 hours to do a cookbook because you still have to validate. You still have to
Yes.
put things together. It's you working with the Gen AI to be creative instead of typing and doing all the hard, what's the right word, mundane work.
Yes.
You can have the Gen AI do the mundane work. You're still doing the thought processing. You're still validating things. So I love that. What other use cases did you find?
We found, you might need to do some editing here because I'm going to have to think for a second. Because we have
No,
six
that's
videos
fine.
up right now. So we have on the YouTube the budgeting. We have, okay, I know one. So one of the things that we found was digging through and finding stuff in Gmail and in Google Drive. So what all can it search and what all can it access and what can it do with it? Can it build you some sort of an Excel document from stuff that you have? Can it go through and send an email on your behalf? Can it go through and check for, I want to look for my Google Drive for this grant that I applied for about 2 years ago. I'm not really sure what it was called, but it was about Thing X. And then you put that in there and say, can you find what that document might be for me? And seeing what are the limitations and what are the things that it's capable of doing right now. And that might not mean that that's where it stops right now. We know that it's going to continue to get better and iterate more, but depending on permissions, depending on different extensions, depending on different add ons, you may or may not be able to do that. Or depending on privacy laws and settings, it may or may not be allowed to do certain stuff on your behalf. And it might say, I can't go that far, but what you might be able to do is, and then type out for you what you yourself could do to do that thing if it can, which is usually what we found, where if it ran into a wall, it didn't just go, I don't know. It would say, well, I can't, but you can, and here's how you can, step by step.
Oh, so it was teaching you how to. Well, that's pretty cool. That's actually very cool. I love the practicalness of this, especially for people that maybe didn't grow up with technology. We have to remember, and you're such a young buck, you don't even know, right?
Yeah,
Um, you grew up with the internet.
yeah,
A majority of the people in the world did not. Right? In fact, my dad will even tell you the first time they got a television,
yeah, yeah,
and they had a telephone party line. They didn't even have a phone in their house, right? And now all this information that we have at our fingertips. So I think it's wonderful that you're working with the seniors. Have you gone and talked to any of them after you've produced these videos and seen how it works with them or interacted with them post
Not
coming up with
as of
this?
yet. The idea is that it's going to be something where we'll create it and then see how the different organizations we're making it for are feeling about it. If they want any sort of tweaks or edits to stuff, if they want other videos made,
And get some feedback
yeah,
that
then get
way.
some
Okay.
feedback instead of just saying we made all these videos and we're ready to go, and they go, well, this isn't useful or this isn't
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Instead of just doing it all, it's here's a couple and just kind of drip some in there, and then say, let us know. We can do more, or we can change course. We can do it differently. How would you prefer? How would you feel about this? And we're putting all these up on the Somerset Builders Club website. All the different things that we're making, we're putting these up so that way people can freely access them. So it's not like it's a paywall thing. It's not like nobody can touch these things and you have to do whatever. It's trying to reduce those barriers to entry to someone getting into something like this, because I know personally, maybe I'm just cheap. If something costs money or if something is something that I have to really
You won't.
dig for, I'm much more averse to it and I'm much more skeptical to it. Where I'm like, is it a money grab? Is it something that I'm going to have to
Yeah.
pay for every time. How interested am I in this to pay $10, $20, $100, whatever it is to access this? It's going to dramatically reduce the interest. And maybe you can get a little bit of interest from people by just giving some free resources. And then maybe there is a more premium, more hands on, more paywalled version that is something you do have to pay money for. But no one would know if they're even interested in it if they almost don't have that free trial or those free resources. Because why would I have interest if I've never been able to touch it before? I'm not going to pay money for something I've never used. I don't even know if I want to use it.
Right.
So trying to do that, especially in Appalachia, because you have that digital divide. And even though there is geospatial divides and things like that, you got to think infrastructure too. A lot of places in Appalachia are getting things like internet in the past 10, 20 years for the first time. They haven't had that. That hasn't been a reliable resource. But you go to the city, people would say, well, of course we have internet. Yeah, but that's a different place. Geographies are different, and
Right.
you got to think
So
about it.
so so let's talk about Appalachia a little bit, right? I mean, there is a digital divide in
Yeah.
Appalachia. Um, and do you see generative AI as a helping bridge that gap or expanding that gap?
I see it as a
Which do you
way
see it?
to bridge it if we continue to do things like what Mayor Johnson is trying to do, which is helping bring
Educate.
that resource and educate. Yes. And he's very forward thinking. Where if you go to Somerset, Somerset's not like your typical small village in Appalachia. It's not. He has a lot of forward thinking stuff going on. They do robotics at the Builders Club. That's not the norm. That's not what you're going to see typically. And it's not only trying to bridge that divide, but other ones too of what are some reasons that towns, villages, cities in those areas struggle to retain people is because it doesn't have more cutting edge stuff. It's not on the forefront of different things. And jobs tend to mirror where the attention's going. It really is an attention economy. So if the attention's on AI and there's no AI where I am, what is my incentive to stay? For career longevity, for feeding a family, for earnings potential, for career growth. You're going to want to go somewhere that has those things. But what if you can position your location as a place that is doing that? And not only doing that, but one of the first to do that and more so on the cutting edge of that. And as you said, no one's really doing the kinds of stuff that he's trying to do. And it's important.
Yeah, I love what he's doing there, and for you to be part of that is absolutely wonderful because he is bringing attention to generative AI and bringing it to his whole village, not just the college graduates there, not just the techie guys that might be living there because it's less expensive and they're working remote, right? And
Right?
I love because it elevates the whole community. I think this is a wonderful program. All right, Zach, if people want to find out more, you've mentioned the Somerset Builders Club.
Yes.
There's a website for that?
Yes. I know that majority of what is posted insofar as the AI stuff goes is on the YouTube. There should also be a website. I can make sure that I get that to you.
Yeah, give me the link,
Yeah.
and I'll put it in my blog.
Yes.
People will be able to get to that. But look for Zach out there on YouTube. He's got a bunch of videos out
Mhm.
there. And Zach, it's always a pleasure talking to you. I love your energy, and I especially love that we've got some Gen Z. I have so much. What's the right word? Admiration for Gen Z. They seem to be go getters, and you're at the tip of the spear of that. So I can see Gen Z taking over the world. I'd love to see that because I've got a gaggle. I got 5 kids that are Gen Zs, and so if they're listening to the show, you guys go conquer the world. I know that's going to be wonderful. So, Zach, well, thank you for coming on the show today. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Embracing Digital Transformation today. If you enjoyed our podcast, give it 5 stars on your favorite podcasting site or YouTube channel. You can find out more information about Embracing Digital Transformation at embracingdigital.org. Until next time, go out and embrace the digital revolution.